Millionaire woman marries street vendor to humiliate him, but the world sees what happens next in the heart of Manhattan's financial district, where glass towers pierce the sky like gleaming daggers. Victoria Sterling commanded an empire worth $3 billion. At 38, she had built Sterling Industries from the ground up, crushing competitors with the same cold precision she applied to everything in her life. Her penthouse office on the 42nd floor overlooked the very streets where common people scurried like ants. And from that height, she had learned to see them as exactly that, insignificant creatures beneath her notice. But one particular ant had managed to irritate her beyond measure. Miguel Santos operated a small food cart on the corner of Wall Street and Broadway, serving authentic Mexican street food to hungry office workers. His cart, painted in vibrant blues and yellows, stood out like a defiant splash of color against the corporate monotony. Every morning at precisely 8:15, as Victoria's black Bentley glided past on her way to Sterling Industries, she would see him there smiling, laughing with customers, treating everyone with the same warm respect regardless of their station in life. The incident that changed everything happened on a particularly stressful Tuesday morning. Victoria's latest acquisition deal had fallen through, costing her company millions. Her mood was already volcanic when traffic forced her car to stop directly beside Miguel's cart. Through her tinted window, she watched him serve a homeless man the same generous portion he would give to any paying customer, refusing the man's crumpled dollar bills with a gentle shake of his head. The sight of such casual kindness struck Victoria like a personal insult. In her world, weakness was currency for exploitation, and Miguel's generosity seemed to mock everything she had built her life upon. When her driver honked impatiently at a pedestrian, Miguel had the audacity to approach their car and politely ask them to be patient, explaining that an elderly woman was crossing slowly. Victoria lowered her window for the first time in years to address a street vendor directly. Miguel's face, weathered by sun and honest work, showed no recognition of who she was. When he smiled at her with the same genuine warmth he showed everyone else, something twisted inside Victoria's chest, a feeling she couldn't name but immediately wanted to destroy. That evening, alone in her marble palace of a penthouse, Victoria conceived a plan that would have made Machiavelli proud. She would marry Miguel Santos, not out of love or even attraction, but as the ultimate demonstration of her power. She would elevate him from his humble station, shower him with luxuries he could never imagine, and then systematically strip away his dignity until he became the broken, grateful servant she believed all poor people secretly were. The plan required careful orchestration. Victoria's team of private investigators compiled a comprehensive dossier on Miguel within 48 hours. 35 years old, originally from Puebla, Mexico, he had immigrated to the United States 15 years earlier with nothing but determination and his grandmother's recipes. He sent most of his earnings back to support his aging parents and younger sister's education. He had never been married, lived alone in a small apartment in Queens, and was beloved by everyone in his neighborhood for his generosity and integrity. Perfect, Victoria thought. The higher his moral standing, the more satisfying his fall would be. Victoria began her campaign with calculated precision. She started visiting Miguel's cart daily, initially pretending to be just another customer curious about authentic Mexican cuisine. She studied his routines, learned his preferences, and most importantly, identified his vulnerabilities. Miguel's greatest weakness, she discovered, was his inability to ignore someone in need. After 2 weeks of casual interaction, Victoria engineered her first test. She had one of her employees pose as a struggling single mother who couldn't afford lunch for her children. As predicted, Miguel immediately offered free meals, even though Victoria's investigators had confirmed he was already operating on razor-thin margins. The hook was set. Victoria began appearing at moments when Miguel was helping others, gradually positioning herself as someone who admired his charitable nature. She crafted a persona, a successful but lonely businesswoman who had grown tired of the shallow world of corporate America and was searching for something real and meaningful. Miguel, kind-hearted and trusting by nature, never suspected deception. He saw Victoria's interest as genuine, never imagining that someone would invest weeks of their time in such an elaborate charade. When she began sharing fabricated stories about her difficult childhood and her desire to find purpose beyond material success, Miguel's compassionate nature responded exactly as Victoria had predicted. The proposal came after 6 weeks of manipulation, disguised as courtship. Victoria chose the moment carefully, a quiet evening after Miguel had spent his own dinner money helping a family whose father had lost his job. As he closed his cart, counting the day's meager earnings, Victoria appeared with a story about a business opportunity that would change his life forever. She claimed to represent a group of investors interested in funding a chain of authentic Mexican restaurants with Miguel as the face and culinary expert of the venture. The catch, she explained with practiced sincerity, was that the investors wanted to see his commitment to the project through a symbolic gesture, a marriage that would demonstrate his willingness to fully embrace American business culture and attract media attention to launch the restaurant chain. Miguel's initial confusion and hesitation were genuine. Marriage for business purposes seemed foreign to someone who viewed marriage as sacred. But Victoria had studied him well. She knew his dreams of providing better opportunities for his family, his desire to honor his grandmother's recipes on a larger scale, and his deep-seated belief that hard work and good intentions would eventually be rewarded. When Miguel expressed concerns about the arrangement, Victoria deployed her most powerful weapon. She offered to pay for his sister's medical school tuition immediately, regardless of whether the business venture succeeded. The offer wasn't just generous, it was precisely calculated to target Miguel's greatest source of stress and guilt. Miguel had been working double shifts and saving every penny for 3 years, but his sister's tuition costs kept rising faster than he could save. The weight of potentially holding back someone he loved was crushing him slowly. Victoria's offer seemed like divine intervention, the answer to prayers he had been too proud to voice aloud. The wedding took place 3 weeks later in a small chapel, with only Victoria's hand-picked photographer present to document what she planned to use as evidence of Miguel's eventual degradation. She had already begun planting stories in society blogs about her charitable marriage to a street vendor, framing the narrative as an eccentric millionaire's social experiment. As Miguel stood at the altar in a rented suit that Victoria had deliberately chosen to be slightly too small, she felt the intoxicating rush of absolute control. He had no idea that his new wife had already planned every humiliation he would endure, every dignity he would be forced to surrender, and every moment of his eventual complete submission to her will. The ceremony was brief and businesslike, exactly as Victoria preferred. When the officiant asked if she took Miguel to be her husband, her yes carried the satisfaction of a predator claiming its prey. Miguel's yes was filled with hope and gratitude, emotions that Victoria found both pathetic and useful. After signing the marriage certificate, Victoria immediately began implementing the next phase of her plan. She announced that Miguel would be moving into her penthouse immediately, leaving behind his small apartment and simple life. She framed this as generosity, but her true intention was isolation. Cutting Miguel off from his support network and familiar environment would make him more dependent on her approval and more vulnerable to psychological manipulation. As they left the chapel together, Victoria's driver captured video of Miguel looking overwhelmed by the luxury of the Bentley, his simple wonder at amenities Victoria took for granted. She planned to use this footage later when his wonder had turned to entitled expectation and his gratitude had soured into resentment. She would show the world how quickly a humble man could be corrupted by unearned wealth. That first evening in the penthouse, as Miguel stood on the balcony looking out at the city lights with an expression of disbelief and gratitude, Victoria felt a momentary twinge of something she couldn't identify. But she quickly suppressed it, reminding herself that sentiment was a luxury she couldn't afford. Miguel Santos was not her husband. He was her project, her experiment in human nature. And ultimately, her victory over the naive belief that goodness could exist without self-interest. The real game was just beginning. Victoria's plan began unraveling in ways she never could have anticipated, starting with Miguel's reaction to luxury itself. Where Victoria expected Miguel to become intoxicated by wealth, he instead seemed almost uncomfortable with excess. Penthouse's opulent furnishings, the army of household staff, the expensive wines and delicacies. Miguel appreciated them politely, but showed no signs of the greed. Victoria was certain lay dormant in every poor person's heart. Instead of demanding more luxuries, Miguel asked Victoria if he could continue working his food cart a few days a week. He missed the daily interactions with his regular customers. He explained and felt guilty about abandoning his corner without proper notice. Victoria agreed, seeing this as an opportunity to document his eventual preference for ease over honest work. But Miguel's behavior at the cart confounded her expectations entirely. Rather than using his new connection to wealth as a source of pride or leverage, he told no one about the marriage. He continued serving the same generous portions, continued refusing payment from those who couldn't afford it, and when customers noticed the simple gold wedding band on his finger, he spoke about his wife with such genuine affection that Victoria's hired photographers captured images of a man clearly in love. This was not part of the plan. Victoria had expected Miguel to become possessive of his newfound status, to lord his fortune over his former peers, or at minimum, to begin taking his comfortable life for granted. Instead, he seemed to view their marriage as a miracle he needed to prove himself worthy of daily. The first crack in Victoria's certainty came during a dinner party she hosted for potential business partners. She had invited Miguel specifically to humiliate him, surrounding him with people who spoke only in financial jargon and cultural references he wouldn't understand. She anticipated watching him stumble through conversations, perhaps becoming defensive or withdrawing in embarrassment. Instead, Miguel transformed the evening in ways Victoria hadn't foreseen. When conversation topics excluded him, rather than sulking, he became genuinely interested in learning. He asked thoughtful questions about business concepts he didn't understand, and his curiosity was so sincere that Victoria's typically cutthroat associates found themselves enjoying the role of teacher. More surprisingly, when the conversation inevitably turned to complaints about service staff, traffic, and other daily irritations of the wealthy, Miguel's perspective shifted the entire tone. He spoke about the individuals behind these inconveniences with such respect and understanding that Victoria's guests began seeing their own lives differently. By evening's end, her party guests were more interested in Miguel's stories about his regular customers than in the multi-million-dollar deals they had originally come to discuss. Victoria watched this transformation with growing unease. Her plan required Miguel to fail, to prove that common people couldn't handle elevation gracefully. Instead, he was elevating everyone around him. The second crack came when Victoria decided to test Miguel's loyalty by staging a scene where he would have to choose between defending her honor and maintaining his principles. She arranged for Anne, actress, to approach Miguel at his food cart, claiming to be a former employee who had been wrongfully terminated by Sterling Industries. Victoria expected Miguel to either blindly defend her actions or to naively believe the actress's sob story, either response providing ammunition for her ultimate humiliation campaign. Instead, Miguel listened carefully to the woman's story, then gently suggested she speak directly with Victoria about her concerns. He refused to either condemn or defend his wife based on secondhand information, offering instead to facilitate a conversation between the two women. When the actress, staying in character, pressed Miguel to choose sides, He quietly but firmly explained that true love meant believing the best about someone, while also holding them accountable to be their best self. His response was so thoughtful and mature that the actress later told Victoria she felt guilty about the deception. Victoria realized with growing alarm that Miguel wasn't becoming corrupted by wealth. He was remaining fundamentally unchanged, while somehow improving everyone around him. The third and most devastating crack came when Victoria discovered Miguel's financial records. Expecting to find evidence of wasteful spending or hidden accounts, she instead found something that made her question everything she thought she knew about human nature. Miguel had been quietly using his access to Victoria's wealth, not for personal gain, but to systematically address every need he had observed in his community. He had paid for his elderly neighbor's medical bills, funded repairs for his local church, and established a small scholarship fund for immigrant students. More surprisingly, he had done all of this using only the modest allowance Victoria had given him for personal expenses, stretching every dollar through careful planning and personal sacrifice. When Victoria confronted him about these expenditures, expecting guilt or defensiveness, Miguel simply explained that he felt blessed to finally have the means to help people he cared about. He had been careful, he assured her, not to use more than she had explicitly given him permission to spend. Standing in her marble-floored office, staring at receipts that proved Miguel's character had remained unshakable despite every luxury she had offered him, Victoria experienced something she hadn't felt in decades: shame. The final revelation came not through any scheme or test, but through a moment of genuine crisis. Victoria suffered a severe allergic reaction during a business dinner, collapsing in her penthouse while Miguel was at his food cart. The attack was serious enough to require immediate hospitalization, and for the first time in her adult life, Victoria found herself completely vulnerable. Miguel's response revealed the true measure of his character. He abandoned his cart mid-service, racing across the city to reach the hospital. For 3 days, while Victoria drifted in and out of consciousness, Miguel never left her bedside. He fielded calls from her business partners with surprising competence, making decisions that protected her interests while she was incapacitated. More importantly, he cared for her with a tenderness that had nothing to do with her wealth or status. When she was finally lucid enough to understand what had happened, Victoria realized that Miguel had proven something she had spent months trying to disprove. Genuine goodness existed, and it was stronger than any corruption she could devise. The final humiliation Victoria experienced was the most profound. She realized she had fallen in love with the man she had married to destroy. As Victoria recovered, she faced a choice that would define the rest of her life. She could continue with her original plan, documenting Miguel's eventual downfall while knowing it would require destroying someone who had shown her nothing but authentic love. Or she could abandon the game entirely and risk the most terrifying possibility of all, that she might be worthy of the love Miguel had offered so freely. The decision came during her first morning back in the penthouse. Miguel had prepared breakfast, using recipes from his grandmother, filling their home with warmth and aromas that no amount of money could purchase. As he helped her to the table with the same gentle care he showed everyone in his life, Victoria realized that she had spent so many years viewing kindness as weakness that she had forgotten it was actually strength. The photographers Victoria had hired to document Miguel's humiliation instead captured something entirely different: a proud, successful woman learning to accept love without conditions, and a humble man teaching her that true wealth had nothing to do with bank accounts. In the end, Victoria's plan to humiliate Miguel had accomplished something far more profound. It had revealed the poverty of her own spirit and offered her the possibility of redemption through genuine, human connection. The world that had been watching for Miguel's downfall instead witnessed Victoria's transformation. The street vendor she had married to break had remained unbroken, and in doing so, had shown her what true strength looked like. Some victories, Victoria learned, came disguised as defeats. And sometimes the greatest power came from admitting you had been powerless all along.
Thank you for watching this story unfold with us here on M&A The Story Unfolds. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a new tale. We'd love to know where you're watching. Leave a comment below and tell us what part of the world you're joining us from. Your support means everything. See you in the next story.